All right, so let's start our webinar. So hello everyone, welcome to our webinar, Stand Out in the Startup Scene in Southeast Asia. I'm Alexa, I'm a business development manager at Newswire, and I'm thrilled to have the panelists here today with us to share some of the insight for Vietnamese startup to shine in the region toward the investor and the media. And before we proceed further, so I would like to share some of the housekeeping matter. So today's webinar will comprise of the panelist discussion and Q&A session. So the webinar will be recorded and shared after today's session. And if you have any question, feel free to put them in the chat box, and we would love to hear your feedback. So do complete the feedback form at the end of this session. All right, so let me introduce you guys to our today's panelists. So I'm really honored to have Matthew here with us as a moderator. So he has 25 years of experience in advising businesses with international practice and international needs. And to give you a more comprehensive view, we got Erik here from Antler to share his insight from investor lens. And we also got Jack from Modmo, an Irish e-biker maker in Vietnam. And his startup has successfully raised 10 million in funding. Congrats to you. And finally, we got Marissa, our PR communication strategist, will help to share her experience to drafting an appealing story for startup to boost your regional awareness. So let's not get you waiting. I will leave the stage to our host, Matthew.
Alexa, thank you very much, and great to be here, and welcome everyone to today's webinar. I'm going to work through this bit of a journey with our panelists to learn a bit about them and find out what works, what doesn't work, how to be successful, and some of the the tips and tricks that they'll be able to share with us. Q&A is really important. We'll get to that and throughout the session, and towards the end, we'll do a good Q&A session so we can delve a bit more into the questions that are relevant for you. I'm going to start a bit from background. So I'm going to throw first to actually Marissa first. Now, Marissa, as a journalist, it might seem strange in some ways to sort of focus on you to start up, but interestingly enough, you've probably got the most experience of anyone with regards to the variety and the breadth of startups that you've been involved with. So a bit about your background of where you got to in the startup scene today, and what you were doing in that space. Mute, Marissa.
Okay, thank you, Matthew, and thanks everyone for joining to this webinar. So yes, you are right that I was a journalist before for over 5 years, and actually after I really dig into the startup scene, I started to see that my journalist experiences has a really great benefits to know how to cover a wide variety of products and tech-related contents that are attractive for the journalists. So that's my experiences working in a feature magazine and doing more reviews about complicated products and technology appliances. And it's very challenging to always learn about how to really crafting a story that is appealing for the journalist, and the most importantly is easy to understand for general public. And moving forward to how I entered to the PR sectors and the branding. So since 2017, I moved to branding and PR consultancy sector. So I started my career in Session PR Newswire and putting PR analysis and metrics as my daily basis. So it's giving me a very new experiences to really explore about how come a story, how come good narratives can really bring an impact to the company and also the startups. So in Session, I learned a lot because a brief information about Session itself. It's actually a PR software and media analytics company that offer end-to-end solutions for the communication. So it allows me to do a lot of analysis about a sector, about a topic and a company, from the media databases, PR and media analytics, monitoring, to providing PR strategy and press release development based on in-depth analysis and outcomes from the tool. So for these past 5 years, if we speak about my experiences handling numerous startups and related tech company, I have helped numerous companies, including technology, startups, private equity, and some notable names, including in Indonesia is largest ID unicorns, such as like Bukalapak and also Traveloka. And I also working closely with some prominent venture capitals in Southeast Asia, including one big name is East Venture. So a part of that, I also work closely with some government bodies in Asia Pacific, including those focusing on startup sectors and innovations in the regions, such as the Indonesian Ministry of Tourism and Creative Economy, which I help with the MSMEs going global, and also the in Ministry of Communications Informatics to help the entrepreneurship education relating to technology and the digital landscape. And the current one is with Taiwan Tech Arena, which is it is an initiative led by Taiwan's ministry to build a vibrant entrepreneurial ecosystem in Taiwan through community building and extensive incubation programs. So it's always challenging that I have the opportunities to always build and grow the startups through a good narrative with different approaches and storytelling.
I think that's the key takeaway from what you've done with hundreds of startups is the story. You've got to get that story right. You've got to get that message out. They'll then feed into Erik, because Erik, you've been both sides of the fence. You've been an entrepreneur, you've done startups, you've seen the good and the bad, and now you fund startups and help them develop from an idea. So, you know, in a couple of minutes, just a bit about your background and where you've got to today and how you fit into the startup scene.
Absolutely. Thank you, Matthew, for that. I started in London studying a very narrow kind of investment degree in the Square Mile in London, and then graduated and started working in investment banking. So I started in that kind of investment world. And then met a girl who's Vietnamese, and that's how I came to Vietnam. So I came here in 2011, and that's also, so I traversed over staying within private equity for my first year here in Vietnam, so staying within investments. And then the following 7-8 years, I did a couple of e-commerce ventures. So I ventured down the entrepreneurial path and then came back to the investment world just recently to be the partner here for Antler, which is a global VC fund that set up camp here in Vietnam about 9 months ago.
Thank you. And we'll explore some of the journeys, because that setting up a VC fund, particularly sort of really early stage, and filtering through, and some of the experiences will be really worthwhile of where to start, where not to start in if you have an idea, which feeds into Jack. Jack, you're an entrepreneur. You haven't been the other side of the fence. You've been bootstrapping and running and ideas, and you've got traction. You've got somewhere now. A bit about the story, your Modmo, where you've got to, but just, you know, leading up to that, of how you ended up being an entrepreneur and doing some fundraising to get to where you are now.
Yeah, I started off as a passionate cyclist, mountain biking mainly, then started my first bike company when I was 16, having bikes produced in China, and I was selling them locally in Ireland. And then I think around 2019, I was taking a trip to China, actually, to check out one of the factories. Somebody recommended I come here to Vietnam to see a super high-tech robotics factory. And kind of after seeing it, I decided I'd settle down here and try build a close partnership with kind of some of the key suppliers. And yeah, I guess COVID happened. We ended up building the entire business out of Vietnam. And actually today, 2 years ago, is when we launched and gathered a huge amount of traction, which is, yeah, kind of led us through to, we've got 60 people today in maybe 5 or 6 different countries. As you mentioned, raised $10 million. We had kind of pre-sold 1,000 bikes before we had actually developed them. So this will be our first year in mass production. And yeah, we're now actually this week, I think on Monday, we produced more bikes in one day than we did in the 2 years previous to that. So yeah, it's good that things are finally ramping up now.
Things are real now. So, and that's part of that journey. And Erik, to get people on that journey, you've been through there, and you're seeing in front of you every day now, people with ideas and dreams. What would you tell someone who came to you and says, Erik, I've got an idea. what's the first discussion with them to sort of put them on the right track, to see if they're dreaming, see if there's something of substance behind there that it's worthwhile pursuing? Where do you start the discussion?
Oh, I just had a discussion earlier today. So we're interviewing candidates now for the second program of Antler already. And first question for me, usually, why are you passionate about this problem that you're solving, right? Being an entrepreneur, Jack can tell you this, it's not always that sexy. It's not always that fun. There's a 99% is, darkness and misery. And then you have the 1% is when you manage to raise that $10 million and have a little bit of a closing party, and then it's back to work, right? So if you're not passionate about it, then it's really hard to go through that marathon, because it really is a marathon. It's not a sprint, right? So entrepreneurs that see, there's a lot of Axie kind of replicas now in the market, that they've seen the success of Axie. They also want to build a unicorn. It's great. We try to steer people towards a real problem they want to solve, as opposed to me too kind of entrepreneurs or ventures. So for me, question number one is always, what are you passionate about? What is the problem you're passionate about solving?
And Marissa, so one of the things that we see, and from Erik talking about, is sort of having a passion. Sometimes we see people have so many ideas and products, and they sort of push things out and they do things. How do people make sure that what they are passionate about is understood and actually meets a need, and is not just lost in the market, or it's just seen in the wrong way? It actually is perceived in the right way, so it can get traction, it can get investment. How do they maximize that sort of their products, they're explaining their journey, explaining their solution?
So actually, in terms of how we should map out our product and tell it to our audiences, the first thing we need to do is actually we need to really understand what is the aim of our product, and also who is the market that we are targeting. So it's not only we consider about where are they located, or maybe things like the demographics, but we really need to dig really deeper about what are the pain points that are facing with the product. So that's when we can capture the emotional value of the product, and we can give the solutions to our audiences, our markets, instead of just announcing that, hey, we have a product. That will be a really good benefit for us to really creating an impact through our products. So that's the most important thing that we really need to dig as the pre-product launching for our audiences, is really know about what are the pain points that we are going to solve with our products, and make sure that we emphasize that through the story, saying like not only the press releases, but we need to give a better education for our markets about the value, about the sector, about the trend that we are going to emphasize into the product, such as like with the expertise sharing or thought leadership articles, something like that. We really need to map out the storytelling into the story.
Perfect. And Jack, does that fit with what you went through when you were sort of had the dream, the product, and then push it out to market? Does that sort of correlate? So I'm sort of interested in different views here, from someone doing the promotion side, the solutions, and then someone actually delivering the product and raising the money. So does that match what Marissa said? Does that sort of correlate with the journey you went on with your product, Jack?
Yeah, I think somewhat. I mean, when we started, we were kind of, say, way ahead of the market. Like, the market didn't really exist when we started building the product. But I guess by the time it was built, I think it was, it was clear then the market did exist. We had product market fit, and I guess there was big demand at that time.
Didn't some of the Vietnamese manufacturers tell you were crazy? Because no one's going to buy it?
Yeah, still to this day. When I talk to a Vietnamese venture capitalist, they're like, oh, $3,000 for a bicycle? You should make motorbikes. For sure.
So leading on that, how did you convince the market to raise your money? And obviously, you raised yours outside of Vietnam. You've got Antler's does it, and Erik does it a different way, and it's sort of inbound, but it's not limited to where you are. So you raised your money outside Vietnam with the main business centered on Vietnam, but you're exporting globally in effect. How did you actually sell your product to the investors?
So in the beginning, couldn't raise money. I was like pitching everybody. No one was really interested. But I mentioned I came to Vietnam and found this great factory, and I convinced them to make me one free sample. And with that sample, then I knew I needed to show that there was demand. So, I got a friend with an iPhone to shoot a video. We said, here's our rough prototype. If you pre-order a bike, you can fund the product development, and that was actually how we funded the company. So we got 1,000 pre-orders for our bike. Within 100 days, we had like €1 million received, with a further €1 million to be received once we started delivering the bikes. And then it was with that traction, we could kind of get to the next step. More investors. I think we raised kind of another €1 million kind of from some very close friends. And yeah, it just kind of went on from there, taking for more steps every time, getting further through the product development and building a real team.
And I'll go back to Erik there. So let's assume you've got a business like Jack's, but it doesn't have to be anything to do with bikes, but they've raised their first round of money. They've got a product. What's the success? How do people be successful beyond that? Because these entrepreneurs, many times they've never had money. They've never had access. All of a sudden they've got a pool of funds. They've got people around them. How do they go to that next stage? Is that natural, or do they have to get outside people in? Is there reticence to sort of grow and change? Sort of Marissa talked about dealing with some of these sort of the unicorns and getting there. It's a big journey. What happens after the first raising of money? Because you're putting your money in first here. You're trying to make sure they do get to that next stage.
Absolutely. So when we put our money in, a lot of founders are itching to start the big marketing machine and get their word out there and do panels and get on Facebook and whatever else, right? So we keep that. The whole first phase of our program is essentially about validation, right? So when we're investing in a fairly validated and a vetted model, but that product market fit still needs to be proven, right? So you need to have paying customers and you need to acquire them at a decent customer acquisition cost and whatnot. So that keeps on going, right? So it's not, when you raise your first fund, you're not home free. That validation keeps on going and going. So and someone like Jack, I mean, from day one, his kind of position as the CEO and founder of the company has changed several times. The JD has changed because he is going to different growth stages. So it's not just about raising that first round and then all is well. Suddenly now you have people who are looking into your balance sheet, your income statement, who are probably getting on monthly or quarterly calls with you to see what the traction is. So that's really when the game starts, right? And hopefully by that time you have a strong kind of consensus on your product market fit, or you have very, very strong validation of it, and that's when that's the route you then take and continue validation with the additional funding you have. So that's how we work with our companies, as being the first money in whatever we invest in.
Fantastic. And Marissa, so some of the failures do happen. We see failures. What are your thoughts? And you get the visibility of course a wide range of companies that you are involved with, you promote. Some do fail. Some fail when they're first raising or later raisings because products change or something's not right. What are some of the key experiences you have for the failure points, for those things people get wrong? And I'm doing this so people learn from that and don't make those mistakes.
Okay, so if we speak about the most failure that most of maybe I can say that I cannot say that it's totally failure, but maybe the barriers that most startups face in the first branding strategy. So actually, like I said before, they don't really know about their market. So it's kind of lack of market research, but the target audiences, the pain points, and also how they should cover the story that are appealing for them, for their audiences. So when they don't understand about what they're going to publish, what they're going to target, they will just only announcing the product and the technology that they have as is. I mean, like using all the technology terminology, the technological term, and also using all the difficult sentences and words that not every people understand about it. And then when the press release is published and the news published, no one really engage with the story because it's hard to understand, especially when we use a lot of difficult terms. So it's really important to doing the analysis and also really monitor about what kind of topics that the journalist is looking for, what kind of story that people in certain areas are actually looking for, the pain points, and how they cover the emotional story and the narratives into the media. So to do this, we are fortunate because at the moment there are a lot of technology, a lot of software, such as like as we over in Session Communication Suite, that we can always analyze about the key topics, about the SEO, about the keywords that we better to use into the story. So it can capture our audience's needs, our audience's pain points, and the most importantly is we can do a conversational story and know how they actually communicate each other into the story. So that's the most important thing to sum up. So we need to put more trust about the product from our audiences. And the second one, make a simple word that easy to understand by our audiences, because they can just engage with a story that to read a story that they feel like communicate with their peers and friends instead of being taught with the news and the difficult terms.
Perfect. There's got a few questions coming through, and everyone, I will come back to them shortly, but there may be partly answers we're going through, so please keep throwing those questions. Jack, as an entrepreneur, what's the thing that worries you most at the stage you're at now? And this is an interesting question that I've asked sometimes. It's always different depending which stage you're of the cycle. What's the biggest concern, the thing that keeps you awake at night about your business now, without giving away any trade secrets or making people sort of take advantage of you, of course? What would that be?
Well, like being in a hardware business, it is the supply chain for sure. It's honestly, like almost every difficulty we have is based on the supply chain, and so many uncertainties. Like, obviously we've got our targets and we're getting there. We've about, say, 60 parts on our bike. And I think a great example is like last week, we had a shipment of 2,000 components arrive, and they had all been produced slightly wrong. And we're on target to have absolutely our best month ever. And then we kind of get slapped in the face with that. So just being in a hardware startup, for me, it's certainly supply chain.
Fantastic. And Erik, what else do you see the concerns, particularly these early stages that you deal with? A lot of them are B2B, B2C, a lot of them are very tech focused. Is it regulation? Is it structuring? Is it product development? Is it understanding a need? What is the biggest sort of issue that they face trying to get to that next level when you're dealing with so many diverse backgrounds, diverse cultures? Even though they're in Vietnam, it's a wide range of cultures you're dealing with. What would those, or one or a number of those issues be that sort of affects or impacts the startups you deal with?
I think the hardest thing for entrepreneurs is actually building something that people really love, right? That's the absolute hardest thing. So getting to that.
You've mentioned passion a few times, and that keeps coming back through passion.
Yeah, and so that's passion for the problem, but then also building something that other people like, right? So you look at who you're targeting, what are their underserved needs, and what's your value proposition to them, right? Getting that formula absolutely right is super difficult. But Vietnam is really good in a way that you can, when I was running my last startup, I had 50 staff here in Vietnam, and my best friend, had a fintech startup in London with 3 people, and we had the same overheads. And I told him, I can't believe you're starting a fintech company in Mayfair with that rent, crazy. And he was like, I can't believe you have 50 people. That's crazy, right? But for me, Vietnam is more about, you can try and fail, quick and easy. You have a big kind of market, big population, fairly big market depending on which vertical you're looking at. So to me, I rather look at those opportunities. But yeah, getting that validation, I think, is always hard. But one of the good things in Vietnam is that you can do kind of gritty bootstrapping and trying to get that, and then you go SCA and global.
And just following up, I'll stick, Erik, just again, it is that I mentioned that nationalities and different cultures sitting in there. What's driving the entrepreneurs in Vietnam, value from in particular these foreign mix in Vietnam? Where's sort of what's driving from a nationality, a cultural perspective, and where you're seeing your potential startups that you're investing in come from?
So when we put the flag, the Antler flag in the ground here, we were thinking, okay, probably going to have something like 80% of Vietnamese nationals applying to our program, and then 20% maybe overseas Vietnamese and expats. First program, we had 45% non-Vietnamese and 55% Vietnamese. There's a big diaspora of just, and this is also during COVID time. So this is when travel, inbound, outbound travel is restricted, right? So these are expats and non-Vietnamese are here on the ground. Our mission has always been uplift Vietnamese startups and founders in Vietnam to a global level. So in terms of getting that culture right, I think anyone who is wanting to execute in Vietnam needs to get the culture right, both in their own culture setting, vis-a-vis the market, but also within the company itself. So we go through that as well in the program. How do you set the tone for your culture in the company? Because that's going to color your hiring and color so many things on how you progress as a company. There's no kind of one size fits all formula for it. I think it's down to the preference of the founders, the preference, how the market is, what they're hiring for, what the specific vertical is they're hiring for. But again, it's I think again, I love to look at this positive. I think Vietnam is an excellent, amazing place to execute in. So yeah, but we were surprised with the high ratio of non-Vietnamese for the first cohort.
And Marissa, that sort of, do you see that across Southeast Asia as a whole, where you've got it isn't sort of only a home ground turf for each country? It is very much a mix. It is people that cross borders. It's much broader than just looking at country by country with nationalities and successful products. I know a lot of the unicorns are homegrown, but there's a lot of expats or international people involved in those unicorns, those startups across Southeast Asia. Is that what you're seeing?
Yeah, so I agree that actually when we speak about the startups opportunity in Southeast Asia markets, so we cannot speak about only between one country and another country like differently, because everything is actually aligning. So I can see that some of the largest opportunity for the startups and the largest startups that has been grown at the moment is actually from a country with a similar characteristic, like maybe Indonesia, Vietnam, Thailand. So it is very interesting to see that those countries have similar characteristics, not only in terms of the culture, but also the challenges that faced by the citizens, from the infrastructure, from the employment, or anything, that we actually have a similar mission to bring a better society. So when I help, let's say like the unicorn in Indonesia, it's actually aligned to help the similar situations in Vietnam. So I think that's a really good idea if the startups can consistently put the stories to the publications, and then giving the opportunity for the other regions to also see the story and learn from there, because we can always look that hey, we don't with our products, with our technology, and I'm not only trying to solve the problems in my countries, but bigger picture that is the global, the region wide, and also this giving the inspirations and making more impact to other countries to also implement maybe the similar products and also the similar solutions. So from the pioneer that you put into the product, you can give a wider impact to the whole society, not only in your area.
Fantastic. I'm going to come back to you, Jack, in a second. I'm going to start with the Q&A, so some good, interesting questions. But before I do that, sort of mixing through there, Erik, of your first round, the round you just did at Antler for the sort of the venture, the VC funding, what proportion were product based versus what proportion were e-commerce or digital based?
Good question. A majority was e-commerce digital based. We had one hardware company coming through would love to see more, but the problem with a program like ours, the first phase is 10 weeks. And coming in with a hardware idea, you got to prototype it and whatnot, and that usually takes a little bit longer than the time setting we have. So usually what happens is coming through IC, we see more kind of tech, SaaS enabled or type business as opposed to
agility. The agility is really important to move fast and play around fast.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Which for Jack was not so. It's a long journey for something like yours. Now I'll start with a Q&A because I think it feeds into this whole example here. So one of the questions that is put to us is, how do you refine and retain people working from Vietnam? Because retention is challenging. Finding key people. You're up to 55 people in country. How do you find and retain to sort of in this startup to keep this business going, the agility that you need, but you've got a product and you need long-term retention of skilled staff?
Was that directed towards me?
That's Jack. Yeah, absolutely. You're the one with the biggest challenge there. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, like, I can't say I'm, basing my decisions off science, but it's really about building a good work environment. Like, for example, Matthew, you might know, we didn't move into, an office. We just took a big villa in Thao Dien. We've got swimming pool, kayaks. We had pet ducks for a long time. It's certainly like giving the Vietnamese guys like the power and like the budget to be able to, bring their ideas to life as well. I try and bring a lot of kind of the Western culture into Vietnam, like, like Dublin, where I'm from, would be full of all the tech companies like Facebook and offering the free lunches and stuff. So, in Vietnam, it's so cost effective for us to do something like that. Of course, we have free lunches for the staff every day, and like we just have a ton of little perks, and just really try and make it a great place to work. Treat people fairly. I think we pay pretty decently in comparison, probably maybe to a local company. So I think it's just a combination of all of those. But I mean, certainly the passion behind the product is probably what keeps people long term.
And I'm just interested, I've got another question for you, Jack, but just interesting, Erik, I'd love to see some ducks in your offices walking around the century. That'd be fantastic.
That'd be amazing. Yeah, so I don't know, Jack, if you've been to a lot of weddings. So I took the approach of going, not trying to infuse my Western culture, but instead adapting to the Vietnamese culture. So I've been to so many weddings, met parents. Sometimes even before hiring someone, I had to go and meet the parents to say, hey, this is what we're all about. Don't worry, I'll take care of your son or your daughter when they come and work for me, things like that. So I think anyone choosing a career path is almost like many things in Vietnam is a family decision. As you know, so as their boss or whatever, the CEO or the co-founder of the company, you can have a lot of gravitas showing up to someone's wedding, and that goes a long way, in my experience, and creates very thankful and loyal employees.
I can relate to that of my 17 years here. The number of weddings, it's I couldn't count now how many I've been to. So Jack, a follow-up question on that is the scaling up. So you've got your staff, you're trying to get their attention, you're creating that culture. How do you keep the momentum going? How do you reach the output? In one day, you've done more than 2 years. How are you going to keep that momentum going? As you've got some money behind you, but money is not as important as that momentum and don't letting it stop. You've got supply chain issues. Can you keep that going? How do you do it?
Oh yeah, I mean, for us, it's just driving as hard as we can. I think everybody's super aligned. You see, maybe it's easy because everybody in Vietnam is 100% focused on producing more bikes. Like that's it. We don't really do any marketing or anything else here. And we want to do 10,000 this year, which is a massive amount. So we've got this mountain to climb, and I think keeping people focused has actually kind of been one of the easier parts. And like it's all about, for sure, we've never had the resources we needed to. Like we didn't have the equipment, we didn't have the headcount, we didn't have the factory, the suppliers, anything like that. But I guess, raising the money has just kind of given us the tools we need to do our job. So, I often like talking to a lot of, say, the founding team, just catching up with them. They're like, you know what, the job has actually almost gotten easier recently because it's not one person doing absolutely everything. And, nobody's going home before 9 or 10 p.m. in the evenings, but now each of the like founding team now has their own small teams, which really helps us like drive and have each person has a much bigger impact on the department. So yeah, I think it's been pretty good recently.
Fantastic. I'll ask anyone out there for Q&A, so start putting your questions. You'd like to hear anything from any of the three speakers here. I'm going to start some questions that was given to me is, and I might ask Marissa, but I'm actually interested in Erik and Jack, your thoughts is, what do you do, what can, as a startup, to sustain the halo effect? So quite often you sort of, it works, you're in the press, you're there. How do you sustain that? So you've got your funding, you've got your first stage. What are the keys to sustain that? Marissa, if you want to throw at that first, and then we can, I'm interested in everyone's opinion on that sort of, that sustaining longevity.
Yeah, okay, so actually, I think the goal and the objectives are quite similar for every startups when we speak about how I can sustain with the investment and everything, which is we aim to attract the investors with our product and our technology and what we are going to launch. But the thing is, sometimes they don't aware that the most important thing here is actually to put the marketing and the branding strategy, because to convince the investor, to convince people to trust more to our product, we need to announce more about our product and the progress. So actually, the investors need to be convinced with proof, and getting your products and progress announced everywhere is the best proof that we can provide to our investors and any potential investors out there. So sometimes they only rely on specific big news, such as I will send the press releases when I close this investment, when I got the funding, when I close with this certain of money. So actually, a part of the investment and the figures announcements, we actually need to put a more consistent story, so people will not forget about what we're going to say, what we're going to launch, and also what actually who we are. So it is important to always map out the storytelling to emphasize your startup's competitive advantages by showing how your innovations have created the significant changes as well to society. So things like a story with social impacts, also the thought leadership stories. So yeah, this is actually what I do as well when I help with a lot of startups and also the MSMEs that actually very new with the product and the technology, but want to getting known out there. Yeah, regardless that they want to increase the user or maybe to get attract more investors. The consistent storytelling is a key to really capture the attention for your audiences, because you cannot say that, hey, my product is really good and people will trust us. No, that is not how it works. We need to put it step by step and put trust in a more sincerity, that people will see that we are not only a product, but we are the problem solver for them.
So Erik, I'll throw it back to you then. What have you seen in your various personal running a startup and growing it to investing? How do you get past that first round of funding, the halo effect, and sustain that? What would you recommend?
I think it comes down to just keep improving the product, right? So as we talked about before, it's very alluring to be out in the press and do the Forbes interviews and whatnot, and do all the interviews and focus more on kind of the media management, the PR, as opposed to focus on actually building your company and growing the business, right? So as Jack knows, right, when you're CEO, his focus is building the business as opposed to just developing the product itself, right? So managing everything around that. So for me, maintaining that halo effect is essentially by continuously just keep delivering to your customers, because that will be much more powerful than any interview, any TV spot that you can do.
Perfect. I actually have another story. I'm going to hit this with Jack to start with a question. So Ms. Yang's asked a question that stories of failures where you thought entrepreneurs would succeed but were wrong. Now, this can be a generic or a specific one, and I'll go to the other specifics. But one of the things, there was a discussion previously that we've had, Jack, and you were sort of talking about one of the key parts of failure. What would be the failure when but individuals? How do you see, what have you seen in your time that you thought people would succeed, but they don't?
Yeah, well, so I guess I've kind of lived through this myself, Matthew, and I guess my view was always like, as the founder, you only fail when you give up, right? Because so many times we ran out of money, this deal fell through, like, so often so many things go wrong. So it was like, I guess, yeah, my experience is more dealing with myself and like kind of just keep fighting, keep looking for solutions, really, because what can stop you?
From what we've said before, it's often it's the person. If they lose interest, then a lot of it is this individual. It's very personal. It's based on people, and it's not just putting money into a project. You're backing a person. So, Erik, what are some of the failures you've seen where you've gone up? That person, either a colleague or someone you've been parallel with your own business, going, that person's going to make it, and they don't. What lessons do you have from that?
Oh my God, 80% is attitude, Matthew. I think even looking through the funnel when we recruit these founders into the program, there's founders that on paper are, home run. And we think, my God, this person's going to go through all the way, easy shots through IC, through demo day, whatever. And then they might not work as hard as everyone else. They might come in with a little bit of an ego. They might spin their wheels. They might take a few weeks to even onboard feedback from the Antler team and from advisors and from speakers we have. So for me, it comes down to it's luckily it's a soft skill, right? So it's less about your experience and more about just how willing you are to work hard, take on board feedback, and just roll with the punches. So for me, that's usually where, at least in the early stage, where most of the founders fail.
So the attitude, as you say, is the key. So Marissa, with the right attitude, do you see serial entrepreneurs? Is that how people become serial entrepreneurs? You find someone with the right attitude, people will back them and back them consistently. Is that sort of a story that you see regularly?
Okay, so when we speak about the story, so actually we don't come with only maybe a story that aim to with a significant purpose with the story, but maybe we can put a more value, we can put like the trend more into the story, and also we can put more analysis about how we should cover, like we can say, like we want to profile the founders, not only about the figures and how great the company are, but also the background story, the history, the emotional, the narratives, and the human interest that we can put into the story as well. Because I believe that everyone will be very interested and will be very engaged if reading a story that is related to them. So we have to try to always relate our story about what the people feels about maybe our products or maybe our technology. And in this case, it's really important that we should put a lot of analysis and also the research to really know about your audiences again. So yeah, actually that kind of story that we can put more flexibility, not only into the announcement, but also put more emotional and the human interest into the story.
Fantastic. Now we've got a Q&A, a question in the chat box here from Ms. Yang. So question for Jack, you probably can read that. You've done an impressive case study for what you've gone through, particularly it has been a journey, as you explained. Talk about the pandemic and any growth tips, anything that you would sort of learn coming out of the pandemic and having to do things in a sort of very constrained way without being able to travel, without being able to really do what you would have done prior to pandemic of just running around and knocking on doors and seeing people and all that touch feeling across borders. What have you learned from that, during this pandemic period with regard to startups and your success?
Yeah, I would say the pandemic put us in some pretty difficult situations, and looking back, they were always, we achieved the most when we kind of had our backs to a wall, when we had no options, and there was no other option but to just do it. So yeah, the pandemic was really difficult, but you know, it also created opportunities. A lot of bigger businesses couldn't adapt, but we were starting in the pandemic. So, you know, maybe one example was like the bike industry, right? It went through insane growth just in the beginning of the pandemic, when of course factories were closing. Previously, when you're buying a component from a supplier, you never wait more than 2 months. And then straight away, the production lead times went up to like 2 years. So while a lot of the big bicycle brands, you know, just couldn't grow, they couldn't produce more bikes, we just took a completely different approach and we started designing our own parts, not going to a bicycle factory, going to a motorbike factory, so that we didn't have all these kind of scaling issues where we're relying on other people. So there's a ton of things like that where, you know, when you think logically, oh, maybe it won't work, or you talk to somebody and they say, no, that won't work, but actually just like doing it. Yeah, I mean, that was kind of a big learning for me, is like, yeah, even if people say it won't work, you just got to like do it your way and try your best. And sometimes results are like pretty good.
So the agility that's been forced upon you by a pandemic probably makes you a better startup, and probably other peers around you as well, probably in the same boat. Yeah,
for sure.
Erik, I'll start with you. Another question about what's happening in 2022. So Vietnamese startups, what do you see for 2022? What's happening at the moment? What are you focusing on, or where do you think the startup scene is going to go?
We had a massive influx of applications in our first cohort about medtech. So that was interesting. Obviously, a COVID pushed kind of, I think, initiative that a lot of people saw. There was a lot of weaknesses in the kind of medical field here in Vietnam. So a lot of founders applied to say, hey, here's a problem I want to solve. And it was both B2B and B2C solutions. For 2022, I think we haven't seen a super strong trend yet. There's still a lot of edtech. People love edtech here. A lot of gaming founders that apply to the program. I think Vietnam has a love affair with gaming historically. First unicorn VNG was a gaming company. Now we have Axie. And you guys all remember Flappy Bird, which was a Vietnamese global phenomenon. You know, so there's something about gaming. So I wouldn't count gaming out as well. There's going to be another Axie there at some point. There's a lot of gamification. So we see a lot of gaming founders want to apply their skills, you know, in an edtech setting or something else. That's also interesting. But in general, yeah, I think there's no clear kind of theme for 2022 apart from no one seems to be slowing down otherwise, right? So we were a little bit scared as well. How is the pandemic impacting people to want to go the entrepreneurial route? You know, do they rather want to stay in a fixed in a corporate position with a fixed salary? But it doesn't seem to be slowing many people down, right? We have still a lot of influx of founders, and again, the subsectors that we see coming through are quite diverse.
Fantastic. Marissa, what do you see, particularly focusing on Vietnam, which is you cover a much broader area, but I'm also, to follow up on Erik's, do you see any trends for 2022 in Vietnam or Southeast Asia? But I'm sort of curious to where you see things going at the moment in the entrepreneur space. And so, you know, Erik sees things in a certain way. Do you concur, or do you see different areas?
So what I see actually will lead to a significant growth for the startups, including in Vietnam, is how more startups will put a more focus on the social impact into the product and the technology that they offer. So it's not only targeting about for business and also for just only certain audiences in certain area, but it's a more wider impact that they want to achieve. So for example, in Indonesia, I will give an example that I think this is very related to the case in other Southeast Asia market with a huge population as well, that we want to not only bring up an impact through our product and the technology from our startups to the population that is the majority like that we can see, but we want to engage more into those that are neglected, we will give more a better lives, a better solutions, and also a better technology, so everyone will get the same benefits to it. So for this community, the kind of sectors that will bring that will dominate the market, that I can see the trend of back then from maybe end of last year is things like logistic, transportation, because it gives a solution to a wider market in not only in the big city, but for other neglected population and also the area.
So it's interesting where you've got entertainment, you've got needs, and there's two different streams there that both have value, and I think they cross over quite a bit. I've got another question. I'm not sure who wants to answer this, but I'm interested in different views. So another question where you've got a company that's been around quite a while. It is, in recent times, it's created a product that is innovative and new, but they've been around a while, financials aren't strong, and they want to push themselves sort of in a startup mode because of the product, the innovation they've now got. Is it possible to raise money as a startup being around a while? Is it something, do you have to reinvent yourself? How should that company go about that? That's a question from the audience. I don't know, Erik or Jack, if you want to have a go, or Marissa. So it's an interesting question.
Sure. I'm assuming here, and that financials is not very strong, is that the top line is not growing as fast as it could do, right? So then you come down to the statement here in the question that great product. Okay, if the product is great, then are you approaching the market in the wrong way? Are you targeting the wrong customer group? So it comes back to that validation, right? So definitely possible to raise funds, but I think there might be needing some kind of calibration and maybe a small pivot to really hit that stride and hit that hockey stick growth. And that's something, you know, when you find the right investor, they should be able to help you with that.
So the validation, and which is what Jack had gone through, is sell a bunch to show that there's demand out there, and then people will chase you, and that's the hockey stick validation where it goes for those products. Jack, is that what you went through? Is that the experience? You couldn't raise money until you had the money, almost?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, we certainly needed the money first, but it was more than that. It was an understanding of the market. You know, I couldn't find that in Vietnam talking to VCs, but as soon as I got back to Ireland, I think I was back 2 days, the first conversation, you know, everybody's like, oh, this makes sense. You know, you can see everybody cycling around on electric bikes. So for me, yeah, what Vietnam was missing was an understanding of the market.
So in some ways, what I get out of this is also get close to where the understanding will be. So if the market, you might have the back office in Vietnam, but if the market, the understanding is outside, is another part of Asia or a different part of Europe, or for example, get close to that, because that's where the funding is going to come from.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, what Jack did,
Erik.
You know, we see a lot of it, especially early stage founders that are pitching, you know, and in their pitch, they say, I think, or I believe. But when you bring data, when you bring actual validation, hard evidence, like Jack, you know, I have an order list here, can you fund me? The conversation is completely different, right? So focus on that in these investor meetings, and the conversation will become much more easy, because you can't argue against that data, right? If people are willing to pay money and to put money in, put deposits in, great, you got to have something. Then you remove yourself for the hypothesis, you know, and you show exactly, you know, the real traction, and that's super, super powerful.
And that correlates, actually, that's what we've said, heard Marissa and Jack was saying, you know, you've got to have something of, you know, they're powerful, but that data is very important. We've got 4 minutes left, so there's no other questions sitting there. I'm going to throw the floor back open. I'll start with Marissa, go Jack, and finish with Erik. Sort of what final tips do you have if you have to sort of do a 1-minute brain dump to someone to sort of educate the startups of what they should be thinking about, and, you know, just really focus elevator pitch now? What would you tell a startup? So Marissa, what would you do in your 1-minute elevator pitch to finish up?
Okay, so maybe one tips that I should bring to startups, that especially for them who aims to expand products to wider market. So I have talked a lot more about how we should understand our target audiences, our target markets, doing the analysis and everything. But when you found about it, and you think that you already found your target audiences, target markets, right? The next step is please be open-minded with any opportunity and any expansion from the markets. And these kind of things, I can say that we can achieve through the consistent story and the publications as well. So it's important to always put the story and publish it to the audiences in a wider area, because I have maybe a short story about one case study from a startups that we're handling, focusing in food production technology. Actually, they initially targeting to specific markets, but surprisingly, when they publish the news globally through the publication, through the media, and put the contact and the more details about the company, they get another opportunity from different markets, from different countries that they never think about before. So when you put a story, maybe a specific tips and very important for startups, when you put stories consistently to the audiences, and also be open-minded about the new markets that you aim to reach, you can reach better. Actually, you will never know that you will get something that you never think before. For example, like target audiences that you never targeted before.
Okay, fantastic. Jack, your 60-second elevator pitch for startups of what you would share with them?
Yeah, I would really just say launch before you're ready. You need to show something in order to get traction, and having even a photoshopped image of what you want to create can bring you a long way in terms of customers or eventually investors, things like that. So, and again, you don't really need to listen to the experts. I find in the early days, the experts were almost always wrong, because you got to be super creative when you're starting from zero and, kind of growth hacking. So yeah, it's like, if you really believe in your idea, you kind of just got to do it and be pretty ruthless, not to listen to the people who aren't going to support you.
Fantastic. There's a role for experts, but there's a role for the entrepreneur just to do what they need to do. So Erik,
the experts are great later, I think. Sorry.
Yeah, true. That's okay. No, so just in 60 seconds, you've got the floor. The last comments, Erik, what's your elevator pitch for startups for teaching them something?
Yeah, keep your pitch very simple. We see so many pitches coming through, and when it takes too long for us to kind of, what is this business actually doing? It creates frustration and questions back and forth. So that two-liner in the beginning of a pitch to really emphasize what the problem you're solving or what you're actually doing with the company, I think is super, super important. And then secondly, the audience, put the audience in the problem you want to solve. So make sure they feel part of the story. No one cares about your story. They care about themselves in your story, right? So I would make sure that the pitch is super, super clean, super simple, simpler than you think. And that will bode for, that's 80% of getting your foot in the door and having a great conversation with an investor.
Fantastic. So that's our time up for today. So Erik, thank you so much. Marissa, thank you very much. And Jack, thank you so much. I've learned a lot from this. I'm sure we could have talked for hours, because there's a lot of lessons that you've all learned, and sharing those is, it's almost like therapy sometimes, is hearing from people, so that there's the ability, we can do it, and there's an opportunity. So thank you again so much. Thank you everyone for attending. I'm going to hand back across to Alexa now just to do the closing, and appreciate everyone today for joining. So Alexa, back across to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, you guys, for sharing. I mean, a big thanks to you, Matthew, Erik, Jack, and Marissa, for sharing a lot of your stories. I actually prepared some of the key takeaway, but I believe that the key takeaway is much more than what I have prepared. So we will, doing the recording as well as the recap, share it again with you guys. And yeah, I hope that our audience have some of ideas for their startup. And don't hesitate to share with us your feedbacks, and see you again in our upcoming events. So thank you, everyone. Yeah.